for later. Anyway, so there was two different topics that kind of got floated around for tonight. One was, I don't even remember what I thought I was going to teach on anymore. But one of the aspects that came up that was posted as the topic is to talk about suffering. To talk about, for me, it's actually, I like to talk about intolerance to suffering, because I feel like it's something that we as a society actually need to kind of build, is an intolerance to suffering, in order to be motivated to practice, right? To find an end to suffering, we have to first come out of denial that we are in fact suffering. And for some people that's easy, and for some people that's hard. But we're gonna sit for a time, and let's see. Yeah, we'll sit for about 30 minutes, and I'm going to give a little bit of instruction, but not a whole lot of instruction. Although, is there anyone that's new to meditation? Some of you raised hands, being new, somewhat new. Yeah. So I just want to see if there's anyone who would benefit from more instruction than not. I mean, I will give some instruction anyway, so it's just a matter of seeing what we got going on. Yeah, so there's about 40 of you signed up. Welcome. And those of you here. All right, so finding a posture that's workable, that's sustainable, where you can feel relaxed and alert. And we're gonna actually work with the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but we're gonna do that in kind of an easy flow. So just allowing the eyes to close. If you feel comfortable, if you don't feel comfortable with the eyes closed, you can just allow the eyes to be downcast. It's totally fine to have the eyes remain open and be downcast. Good, and just settling in. And for the first few moments, really just opening to the comings and goings of sound, sounds outside the room, sounds inside the room. As we settle in, just seeing if you can allow sound to be in the background of attention. As we aim the attention towards this experience of breathing. Perhaps taking a moment of gratitude for our ability to take a breath. Awareness of this body, breathing. Aiming the attention towards this experience, perhaps the tip of the nose or the rise and fall of the belly. Whatever's easiest way to connect. Of course, the mind may wander off into thinking or planning, history or mystery. Just acknowledging where the tendency of the mind goes, and with a sense of friendliness or kindness with the mind, aiming the attention back here, now. Just allowing some simple instructions to relax, observe, allow each breath, each moment. The invitation here is to collect the attention So again and again, whenever we recognize that the attention wanders off, aiming the attention back, connecting with the experience of breathing, tip of the nose, rise and fall of the belly, experience of the body sitting, breathing. Then just utilizing the instruction, relaxing into each new breath, each new moment. Observing what arises in the sense doors, in the mind, in the body. And then allowing whatever arises to stay for a time and pass away. Like all things do. Relax, observe, allow. Mindfulness allows us to recognize whenever we're lost in thought, or feeling, stories, drifting away in history or mystery. The invitation is to, right in that moment, allow some kindness, some compassion, knowing that this is what the mind does. Thinks, plans, remembers. And then aiming the attention back here. Checking in with the body. Opening to the feeling tones, a felt sense of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Relax, observe, allow. Each breath, each moment. opening to the moods in the mind, the weather patterns, perhaps the themes. Can we stay connected to the breath and body as a primary meditation object while opening to the thoughts and feelings, feeling tones, without getting lost in them? Kind of like clouds through the sky. Just observing, allowing. For the last few moments of this meditation practice, just invite a reflection, perhaps with the breath, just reflecting on this question: I cause my own suffering by. I cause my own suffering by, perhaps dropping this question into our awareness, and then just observing what comes up without getting too lost in thought. Can we stay connected to the breath and body, feeling tones, while reflecting in the mind, here, now? if you feel so inclined, just letting go of that question. Dropping back in to the instruction, relax, observe, allow. This present time experience. Welcome, perhaps those who joined during the meditation. I'm so curious what happened for people. I wanted to just like open up to questions right now. Well, I will. I'll open up for any, if you have any questions about the instruction, and maybe just before we do that, just take a moment to kind of reflect for yourself. Like there was that, I kind of threw a little curveball at the end there of like the reflection of, I caused my own suffering by, which is really the lead into the talk. And so I just wanted to, let's just take a moment and maybe reflect about that, like kind of what came up for you during that practice. Then I'll open up for either if there's a few questions or even a comment or two about what happened for you. Take a few minutes. So if you're online, if you just raise your hand, there's like a little green hand. It's in your more, or I think it's in more. Or if there's anyone here, you can raise your non-green hand. You don't have to raise, just let me know. Sure, what, any reflections or question on the instruction?
Yeah, another time you posed that question, how do you cause your suffering? How do you cause your suffering? And what always comes to mind is, I can't think of the guy's name who made the documentary on Ram Dass, who said to Ram Dass, I found you because I had an abundance of lack. And that phrase has stuck with me since I saw that. And so that is always the first thing that pops up about that question is when I feel like I have an abundance of lack, I cause my own suffering. When I'm not connected to gratitude practice, I cause my own suffering. And it's super clear that I am causing my own suffering. It's not external things, it's internal.
Okay. Yeah, please.
I was particularly struggling today in meditation. I just not in a moment of quiet inside my head and just thinking about all these things that I have to do, but which actually, along with like physical stuff, but then when you asked that question, it was actually very helpful because I kind of realized that I do that a lot. I worry about the future a lot, and I think that I've been doing that particularly the past few days. I just have a lot going on, and realizing that because I'm always doing stuff also while I'm thinking about the stuff I then have to do, that trying to sit here quietly and not doing those things that distract me from the awareness that I'm thinking about the future, that I realize that when I'm not actually doing anything, that's all there is. I'm just thinking about the future. I'm not racing. But I appreciated that question.
Yeah, well, it was a great example because that's a tendency. Like, so before I gave the question, I asked if you noticed themes or moods or tendencies in the mind. And so that is a tendency. So that's an insight. Oh, I have a tendency to be future focused, and that probably causes me anxiety or excessive worry, right? So coming back to more of a psychological, because really the Buddha was the first psychoanalyst. I mean, he was the first psychiatrist, the first psychoanalyst, and I'll break that down a little bit more. And I feel pretty confident about that in my study of both Western psychology and Buddhism and other Eastern philosophies. But so that's an insight. And then to be able to see that in that tendency and then come back to the question, great. And then hopefully, so, and you also raised your hand like you haven't been here for a long time. So, hopefully that will lessen over time and there'll be more present time experience. It's one of the first insights that I remember experiencing is, holy shit, my mind is out of fucking control. Like that was the first insight. Like my mind is out of control. I have no agency over it. It's doing whatever the hell it wants. And then I read a teaching from the Buddha that the mind is flighty, alighting where it wishes. And I was like, oh yeah, that's basically the Buddha saying what I say to myself, which is, holy shit, my mind's out of control, And then over time, as there's more collection. And so, yeah, so you're right on track. And it's a good insight. Okay, there are a couple of things that came up here. So Monica wrote, my cat was drawn to the energy of the sit. Now I have another yogi, the feline kind. Yeah, that's great. I felt my whole body full with Q. I think you're saying maybe chi. This is Jewel. Awesome. I remember early on, I started a meditation group years and years ago called Santa Cruz Dharma Punks. And we started sitting in my friend's living room, and she had a couple dogs, like little, I don't know what they were, like Russell Terriers or something. And Jack Russell, is that what they're called? Jack Russell Terriers. And some cats. And we would sit in the living room. It was a big, old Victorian house. And they would gravitate towards us. Yeah. Something about the calm was attractive to them. I don't know. So I understand what you're saying, Monica. All right. I think that's looks like enough for now. All right. So this is a little bit of the whole thing was kind of a lead in yeah, please.
It's interesting, meditation.
Mm-hmm.
At first, my mind was just jumping around. Then when you said history or mystery, I looked at the future as a mystery. It seemed to calm down.
Oh, good.
Question, how do I cause the suffering? The first thing that came up, I had to laugh because it was like I'm being an idiot. That was the first thing that popped in my mind. And then I was like, why are you judging me? Why are you judging me? Why are you judging this thought? Why are you attaching something to it?
Right.
And then other things popped up. How it's called suffering. It's just interesting how words can kind of ease the mind or cause anxiety.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just repeat for the folks at home. He's talking about reflecting, doing the reflection of I caused my own suffering by, and then coming up, like the first thing that popped up was I'm an idiot. Is that what you said? Yeah, because I'm an idiot. That's why, right? I'm sure a lot of us might be able to relate to that. And then immediately a judgment, right? Of judging that voice, maybe the critic, right? I think a really common experience, yeah. And then to kind of soften, it can be a stark insight. Oh wow, yeah. So even just that for some people and for myself too, like starting with that concept of like, wait, what? I caused my own suffering? Like that can be there's like a rub there. Wait, well, no, you caused my suffering. Like all of you, the government, the boss, the traffic, the cops, the this, the that, my family, you're all causing my suffering, right? I'm good. Breaking that denial, right? To say like, actually, it's my relationship to the outside world and my internal world, the internal and the external, that is actually the cause. And so the second noble truth is looking at the cause, but we're still up at the first noble truth, which is just coming out of denial. For some people, it takes lifetimes, it takes years coming out of denial of like, we're in suffering, that we suffer. Some people they're really quick to recognize, oh, I'm suffering. Like there is suffering. I have suffering in my life, but aren't necessarily willing to do anything about it. I mean, they're actually kind of comfortable, right? Some people call it sitting in their shit, right? This like comfortable in chaos, or I have a tolerance. I've developed a tolerance over years of conditioned reactivity and or behavior to actually have kind of a tolerance to my suffering. And I was like that for a long time. I mean, I learned how to meditate when I was like 16, but I didn't really start to apply this. It just was like a stress reduction tool, for many years, which is great. It worked and it kept me meditating. But as I started to understand more about the Dharma, more about the Buddhist teachings, I started to become a little more clear there is suffering here. And this is, something that we talk about as Dharma punks. We were pretty understanding of suffering, but not necessarily what to do about it other than to rage or to, get high, drunk, or loaded, or try to numb out, or try to, whatever it is, seek pleasurable experience or avoid unpleasant experience, One second, let me just kind of break through the four noble truths. So the first noble truth of the Buddhist teaching, which is really the groundwork of all of the other teachings, is really that there is suffering, which is the ailment. So the Buddha's diagnosis, as the first psychiatrist, there's an ailment. There's an ailment in the mind, and we need to look at it. So the diagnosis is the second noble truth, that there is a cause to this suffering, right? So there's a diagnosis. Oh, there's a cause. And we'll, maybe get into that. Either Noah will cover that, or I'll cover that next Wednesday, or we'll see. We'll just keep moving with that. But the third noble truth is that there's an end, there's a prognosis. The prognosis is good, actually, that we can come to an end of suffering. Or the way I like to more realistically discuss it, we can alleviate a tremendous amount of suffering that we cause ourselves, through the fourth noble truth, which is the prescription, which is the practice, the eightfold path, the sila, the ethical integrity, the living by ethical principles, the concentrated awareness, the collecting of attention, the being able to kind of rebel against the mind's tendency to do whatever the hell it wants. and then the development of wisdom through this mindful, so concentration and mindfulness together is what's developing wisdom, seeing clearly. Oh, first of all, I have to see suffering and truly understand it. We're going to break that down a little bit more today. But before I do that, I want to do you have a question or?
Just basically a statement that you say it's not my, I guess, taking responsibility. So my husband many times makes me nuts, right? And so I would.
Does he actually make you nuts, or is he nuts and you have a response to his
Listen,
nuts?
he says some stupid ass shit. And so that just aggravates me. So I mean, so yeah, I mean, he's causing me my suffering.
Well, I would challenge that a little bit, but also just to look for yourself, to reflect for yourself. The challenge would be, does anyone actually ever make you feel any particular way? Or is it actually that you're feeling a particular way due to your relationship to causes and conditions externally? So let's run through it's a great reflection though. I think it's a great reflection because I think that's often the case is we're often like, no, like I was saying before, you all cause me suffering. But in reality, everyone and everything is just doing what it's doing. And my relationship to it, my reaction, my response, my grasping, my aversion, like that's the choice that I'm making. And sometimes it's not actually a choice. I mean, let's just be real. We're so conditioned instinctually, innately, evolutionarily to grasp towards pleasure. I mean, we talk about this all the time. This is the fundamental aspect of Buddhism. We grasp towards pleasurable experiences, and then that grasping causes suffering. It's not the pleasurable experience itself, actually. We have tons of pleasurable experiences, and if you've ever noticed, maybe some of the ones that you just experience, they're pleasurable, and then we know that they're going to pass. We know that they're going to end, and they're just like a vacation that is going to come to an end. You go and it's beautiful and you have a good time, hopefully. Maybe there's like several thousand moments, depends on if you're going with your husband or not. There's several thousand moments where we can cling or repel an experience. And then that is the relationship really that in this reflection is the cause of our suffering. The repetitive craving to have things be other than they are. If my boss would just bop, bop, bop. If my partner would just bop, bop, bop. If, whatever it is, right? If the traffic wasn't so loud, if it was totally, I have to tell you, like all of my experiences traveling here in Los Angeles, the height, like, let's see, January, February, like middle of February, so great to drive. It was like no one on the road. It was great, perfect. I was like, oh, this is what it's like with the world with less people in it, And then, and then that lasted for a period of time. But I had this moment of like experiencing what it was like, to not have suffering while driving, that I was causing myself because of my relationship to it. Some people really love, they'll like drive across town and it's not an issue and they just are like with it, So anyway, so just upon further reflection. So I'll open up for some more questions, but I kind of want to get through the bulk of my bit here on the first noble truth. And then we'll open up for some questions. So the first noble truth, the Buddha described dukkha. One of the dukkha means suffering. It means dissatisfaction with the way things are. It means entanglement of the mind. It means for some people, it means stress. So there's a lot of different ways we can call it. And one of my favorite translations that I heard that I just think is super relatable is dukkha means impatience. So how do we cause suffering to ourselves? Impatience. How do we end suffering? Patience. Now, it may not totally translate to every aspect, but I just like that translation. I had heard that from a teacher a long time ago, and it's just always stuck with me because I realized that usually, like even when I'm driving, like when I'm having an unpleasant suffering moment, is because I'm choosing to be impatient, and that the shift can be being patient. And in that moment, I actually can relieve my own suffering, which is the hope. Okay. So the Buddha acknowledged that there is an inherent problem, right? Dis-ease, in this realm being the human realm. And the Buddha acknowledged that not all life is suffering, but that there is inherent suffering in this world. In other words, that's what this world is. That's what samsara is, this cycle of birth, suffering, death, birth, suffering, death, over and over and over again. And if we think about it, like this whole planet is designed in cycles. The way that the earth spins, the way that the sun is, our whole solar system. So he was also just observing that there's these samsaric cycles that are taking place and karmic cycles that are taking place. And that when we cling to certain, anything really, that we're causing even smaller little cycles, but through the day, through the moment, even a breath is a cycle. And we're really, like, one of the ways of seeing is that we can find a contraction or like relaxation within one breath, even with a half a breath. And so we can choose in any moment to let go of the cycle of suffering. And I like that, because that really gives us a lot of agency. Like, we have a lot of agency. And that's really, Buddhism is about, like, yeah, you know what? Like, here's the plan, and here's the tools, and have a good journey, and then there's guides along the way. The Buddha was one guide, right? And then subsequent teachers are guides. I kind of consider myself a guide, All right, so he gave some specific definitions to suffering, though, to dukkha. And so he was specific in saying birth is suffering, aging is suffering, sickness is suffering, death is suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair is suffering. Not to obtain what one wants is suffering. To obtain what one doesn't want is suffering. I added that one. That's not on the list. But that's what's been true for me. That, in short, the 5 aggregates affected by clinging are suffering. And I know that Noah went over the 5 aggregates not that long ago, the piles, right? The piles of stuff which we identify with and cling to. All right, so let me just kind of break those down for a little bit. So these 5 aggregates that we cling to, that cause us suffering, right, are material form. So our physical body or sense faculties, all mental objects in the external world. So anything in the external world that we cling to, like a car or a house or a relationship or just so many things, everything that we cling to in the external world, the clinging is the suffering or the cause. So not the external world, not the material form itself. There's nothing wrong with seeing a beautiful sunset or being on a vacation, but it's the clinging to it, right? That's the cause. Feelings. So the affective feelings of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. I gave you a little point to this during the meditation, and maybe you were able to kind of move into that, because in my other group on Wednesday, I had been doing this whole Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness. And one of the major aspects of seeing where we cling or crave or where we release is in this feeling tone. So the third aspect of these aggregates is known as perception. So our view of things, right? The perceptual database. If I cling to my view of the way that this government should be carrying on about this COVID situation, I'm likely to cause some suffering for myself. right? I mean, and I have, you know. This is where I love about mindfulness, that I can recognize, oh, I'm off in some story. I'm recognizing some tension in my body as a relation to, you know, hearing the news or whatever, which I just kind of stopped watching for a while. But yeah, perception and our perceptual database, right? So discerning the quality of things, including recognition and memory. This is what we're calling perception from the Buddhist kind of psychology. Okay, mental formations. These are the stories that we create based on the first three, based on material form, feelings, and then perception. We create stories, or we remember old stories, right? Which I call re-stimulation, that we then imprint onto the current situation. I heard the Dalai Lama call it mental imputation, which is like to impute a past experience onto the here and now. And just about every time I think we get into a relationship, whether it's a new work relationship or a romantic relationship or a friendship relationship, there's some mental imputation that's taking place. And part of what Buddhism is helping us to do is to be able to kind of create some space so that maybe we don't do that. So anyway, the definition of mental formation is all wholesome and unwholesome mental factors, such as compassion, volition, and attachment. All right, so the fifth, which, some people feel is a confusing topic, but is consciousness. So clinging to consciousness, clinging to my view of consciousness, my perception of consciousness, identifying with consciousness as me, this is a cause of suffering. Awareness through contact between object and its corresponding organ. That's it. Object, corresponding organ. Sound, ear. Light, eye. And our attachment to what that might be, the clinging to that, is a cause of suffering. This is one of my favorite examples. This is a material form. Material form. There's some kind of feeling tone that's happening. There's some perception. The consciousness is the knowing of what is being heard. And I once had a teacher tell me that even the sound wave is material form. Even though we might experience it as something different, but it is actually material form. It's sound and, entering the ear, vibrating the ear. Yet we cling to these as me and mine, and then thus causing suffering. So there's a few other ways that the Buddha broke down this understanding of suffering. So this is like, okay, material form. I think we've talked about these aggregates. We cling to these things. Okay, so that happens, sure. And we can slowly unravel by concentration, by mindfulness, by bringing body-centered awareness, by practicing time and time again. And any of you who have sat even a day long, or continuously, 20 minutes a day or an hour a day, then you begin to you can kind of tease it out. And, this is one of the reasons why maybe in this tradition, meaning kind of Vipassana or insight, or even the Thai forest tradition, there's a lot of emphasis on meditation, because that's the prescription that the Buddha gave, right? Also not being a jackass, right? Don't be a jackass. And be of service when you can, and try to see things clearly through concentration, mindfulness, compassion, forgiveness. All right, so there's a big, I don't know if it's big, I think it's big. Initially there's a some people that don't understand, and even teachers, I hear teachers talk about these two things interchangeably, pain and suffering, right? Well, pain is suffering. Suffering is pain. No, pain is inevitable, right? You all heard this. Pain is inevitable, suffering, optional, right? Right. Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. So we will get sick, we will get old, that which we love will be removed from us. We will maybe injure this body. We will lose jobs. We will lose relationships. We will be parted from those things we love. Our relationship to that experience is the cause of suffering. Pain is the reality of living in a body that is subject to old age, sickness, and death. And one of the like smacks that the Buddha is trying to give us is wake up to that. Wake up to the reality that that is what pain, that's pain. And pain is part of life. Absolutely. Suffering is when we cling to the pain or identify with the pain as me or mine. And if we think about, and I'm not trying to take away, I work as a trauma therapist. I'm not trying to take this at all away. Trauma is huge. I work with trauma all the time. I work with PTSD. I work with all different complex trauma. And so much of trauma is locked in or craving attachment to past experience that hasn't been released yet, that needs to be, that's being called to be released. And sometimes that means feeling it. Sometimes that means letting it go. Sometimes that means processing it. Sometimes that means integrating it. But the clinging, which is actually a protective measure when we're talking about trauma, the clinging to the pain is to say, and I've had tons of trauma in my life. And I was in total denial of the amount of trauma that I had in my own life. I was like, that was just growing up, being beaten or being starved or being ignored or having to fight or steal for survival. That's not trauma. That's just life, right? For years. I mean, because we just do what we have to do. And there's a protective quality that kind of keeps us embedded around that. And so trauma therapy and using mindfulness and meditation as a way is releasing that a little bit and seeing, that there's this layer of suffering that I'm continually cycling through as a way to continually protect myself, right? You have a question.
So it doesn't matter the type of attachment style an individual has, as like an attachment style.
Okay, so you're talking about attachment styles, meaning kind of the psychological view of attachment styles, secure, avoidant.
Yes, so that doesn't matter.
Not from the Buddhist perspective, no. Each, I mean, even the securest of attachment style is clinging to something and causing suffering, right? And are you talking about specifically around or in regards to trauma?
Yes, correct.
Well, the more, the levels of, or the more challenging kind of traumatic experiences come from specific attachment styles. If we really want to go into, I don't want to break down attachment theory, Linda Lee, we could talk about it some other time, but I actually have a great paper from Dan Siegel at UCLA, who is like, this is like the verdict saying about attachment. I just read it actually, and it's really great. I can send it to you. But anyway, I'll just answer that question. So secure attachment, less likely for trauma, moving down, more likeliness. Disorganized attachment, the most prone to traumatic, to internalize traumatic experiences. Right? So just to say, someone can have a car crash and then just like move through that experience. And if they have a secure attachment and some structures in place, they're more likely to be able to move through that experience. Where someone else who maybe doesn't have support or has a different attachment style might be more subject to having having a traumatic experience, right? So that's as much as I want to say about it, because it's a good point though, because we're using the word attachment, right? Clinging. And then we're talking about attachment style, but that's two different things. I mean, it's similar, but different. Okay. I kind of got off on a tangent. So suffering, pain. One of the ways that it's described is through a simile that the Buddha gave. And so I have this arrow tattooed on my thumb. And it's to remind me that life there is painful and that we will be shot with the arrows of life. We will be shot with the arrows of life. Every single being, right? Every single being. And then there is a second arrow that we often stab ourselves with as a way to avoid the pain of the first arrow, right? This is called the simile of the arrows, or sometimes it's called the darts. And so part of that is like recognizing through mindfulness, through meditation, through loving kindness, through compassion, through forgiveness practice, that there is pain and that we need to attend to the wound. Attend to the pain. And we're so conditioned to avoid it, right? That then we come up with all these strategies, right? So that's what the Buddha called dukkha, right? So there's the suffering of avoiding the pain. And then there's all of the strategies that we do to continue to avoid that are causing more suffering, which is why that reflection I cause my own suffering by. It can be so useful to kind of break the denial instead of it being about all of them and actually, oh, I continually do this repetitive behavior, repetitive craving, which causes me suffering. And I wish I could say that just having the awareness of that and you're good, just awareness of that. I have had awareness of that for at least 10 years, at least a decade. I still cause my own suffering all the time. You know, less degrees maybe at some points, but there's absolutely been, you know, because we have there's another aspect. So that was the first one, the suffering of suffering. The second is the suffering of change. The suffering of change, right? This is the suffering caused by clinging to pleasurable or false or temporary happiness, joy, and attachment. There is, you know, also a way in which aversion is a part of this suffering too, because what we're saying is we're denying the fact that change, impermanence, anicca exists. And in doing that, we cling to wanting things to be other. I don't want this to change, or I want this to change, right? And you've heard me, perhaps, talk about this idea of like when we're clinging to a pleasurable experience, it is getting ripped from our experience. It's getting ripped from our lives, getting ripped from present time experience, and thus causing rope burn. And the rope burn is the suffering. So what do? Let go. Non-attached appreciation. You know, this, I have to say, like, this is one of the aspects that, you know, Noah's retranslation of this kind of cause of suffering and the way away from it. It's non-attached appreciation. It's not denying pleasure. It's saying don't cling. Clinging is the suffering, right? So the suffering of change. So the third aspect, you know, this is conditioned suffering. This is the suffering of the conditional world. We're all living in the middle of a pandemic. That is a condition. We're all, some people are out of work, some people are struggling emotionally, isolation, depression, anxiety, fear, uncertainty, doubt. This is the conditioned. There's not much we can do about it. And so there's a lot, and there's also, there's a little bit of like the part of the suffering of it is in not taking it personal, first of all, like it's about me. This is about me. This coronavirus thing is to keep me away from people, right? Because I'm such a bad person, or, you know, whatever the story is that we all come up with, right? Or I cause my suffering because I'm an idiot, right? Like this coronavirus is because I'm an idiot, you know, or, you know, whatever it is, right? So there's this kind of self-reflective, obsessive, attached component to it. That, you know, I think maybe people in this room and maybe people listening, you know, the fact that you're here, you've heard some Dharma, you've practiced some meditation, you might have a looser view. Not to call out, but I'll call out a little bit. But the people that are like picketing about haircuts and, you know, being able to go to a restaurant or whatever, they're taking it extremely personally. You're infringing upon my rights, you know? So there's that view that's causing suffering. And then there's the view that others have about that view that's causing suffering, right? So whatever side we're on, it's the clinging to the view that can cause suffering. So this idea of the conditioned, right? This is influenced by causes and conditions. This can also lead a little bit into trauma. That trauma based on causes and conditions, traumatic experiences can happen. Our clinging to the traumatic experience will continually cause suffering until we are able to release it. And it's easier said than done to go like this, right? As someone who has been working through trauma and with trauma for a very long time. But it's possible. Okay, so let's skip the rest of this. Well, I mean, here's a little bit of like reframe just to kind of bring the Buddhist teachings and the Dalai Lama in, because I had trained a little bit with the Dalai Lama, and part of this talk was informed by, well, it's informed by quite a few books from the Dalai Lama, The Art of Happiness being one, Dealing with Difficult Emotions being another. But the Dalai Lama says the root cause of suffering being ignorance and grasping, clinging to things that change. That's the Dalai Lama's kind of, and then according to the Dalai Lama and the Buddhist teachings, the root cause of suffering can be eliminated by awareness of the mental states as they arise. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, stories that we're creating, right? And then if we can habituate our minds towards non-grasping, in essence, transforming our mind or our mental habits, then we will gain knowledge and then come out of ignorance, as well as decrease suffering. So the work continues. Okay, so I'm going to open up for questions, anything you didn't understand. You know, this is in essence the first noble truth, but expanding this kind of concept of what are the aspects of suffering. So and how is pain and suffering different? That's what I was hoping to achieve. Okay, so questions, either from online, from the folks at home, or in the room. Please.
What did you mean by integrating trauma?
What did I mean by integrating trauma? So traumatic experiences, and I'll give a brief understanding of it. Traumatic experiences happen in our lives. We've all experienced some kind of trauma. Please, I'll just mute you all. So traumatic experiences happen, and what happens for people that don't carry trauma, that don't develop into PTSD, is they're actually able to process through And a lot of people can't. They don't have, for whatever reason, it's too overwhelming. They have protective measures that have been in place since they were children. And so there's a split that happens. There's a mental left brain kind of cognitive understanding of an experience, and there's a right brain emotional experience, and that they're split. And this is what actually keeps trauma often locked in our minds, and we are ruminating about it, we're dreaming about it, we're having nightmares about past experiences because it's separated. And so one of the things that I do is EMDR therapy, and there's other forms of trauma therapy that take those two isolated pieces of a traumatic experience and then integrate them so that it can be digested, right? Which in essence, I want to just also say is really the definition from the Buddhist perspective of why we suffer. We suffer because we experience painful experiences and we avoid it or we cling to it, right? And then the avoiding or the clinging is the causing of suffering. With trauma, often, well, actually it's still the same. It's still avoidance or clinging. And that's what causes suffering. And so by learning how to digest or allow, so if we can just have an experience, a painful breakup, okay, we've all probably had one, at least, maybe. So if we can have a painful breakup and allow that grief, allow the process, talk with others, build strength within that understanding, then we can let it go as we move forward, because anicca, impermanent nature of things, is going to continue to happen. But if we cling to it and go, God, I should have done this better and that different and them and they did this and I did that and and we kind of carry it with us to the next relationship or 25 relationships. Yes, please.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for your hands at home.
Thanks, Jason. This is good stuff. Good. Two questions. The first, just when you were talking about the rope, just to clarify, that was like you were holding on to past experiences. Is that what you meant by the rope?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're trying to hold on to a past experience and then just.
I mean, that's one aspect of it, is holding on to past experience, but it's actually like if I'm right here, right now, in this moment, having a pleasurable experience and I'm holding on to it, it's gonna cause rope burn.
Oh, because it's temporary.
Yes, because it will get pulled from me, right? The best orgasm of your life didn't last. And if you're holding on to it, right, it's not gonna, it's gonna be painful. Right? And then we'll never be able to achieve an orgasm like that again because it was so good. I want to have it, you know what I mean? Like, so that's just one example, right?
Or just thinking of past relationships, or just only thinking about the good, maybe.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And then I like that. And then the other thing too, I'll be completely honest with you.
Please.
The COVID thing, I cannot shake it, man. I'll be political. But I'm in the camp of like, we're talking about trauma. I didn't know trauma history. I very, in a general way, grew up in Catholic private school.
Uh-huh.
To shut up.
Yeah.
Fall in line.
Yeah.
Don't question.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm like, this is like some old school trauma because I didn't really feel like that.
Yeah.
Just
Like the whole
shut up,
country is saying, shut up and stay
question,
home.
inside.
Yeah.
And
Go in
then
your
these
room.
Camps,
Right.
my parents included.
Yeah.
Who were like, oh, just shut up. Dangerous for questioning. And I'm like, man, I literally feel like I'm back in like Catholic in like second grade.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I can't shake this feeling of like oppression.
Yeah.
So, man, I'm like, and if I just comply, then I feel like, fuck, I'm just giving in to this like oppression. I feel like a little kid again. So,
Uh-huh.
just being honest, because that's what bothers me. Because I just can't seem to shake that.
Yeah. Great. I'm really glad that you said that. So he's talking about the conditioned suffering that he's experiencing. And part of it is re-stimulation from old stories, right? And experiences that were unpleasant. And that this is a mental imputation, right? Just to use that fancy word that, like I don't know. I like the word, but, and it means exactly what we're talking about. Like bringing our baggage and putting it onto a current experience and being like, you're not the boss of me. You can't tell me what to do. Right. Which I have tons, that's why I've been so rebellious in my life. And and actually I want to just say also, one of the things I love about Against the Stream and Buddhism, that's okay. Like you can be totally rebellious. Like you can actually, the Buddhism is rebellious, right? It's rebelling against the status quo. It's rebelling against what we're normally thinking. And it's okay to question because they don't fucking know what they're doing. Like, have you guys noticed? Like, they don't know what they're doing. Maybe Fauci kind of has caught up like a little bit, but still this like, but there is part of that individualization of like, this is happening to me. You're telling me, I tell people when I'm working with them, I say, look, the outside world isn't the enemy. Go outside, go on walks, go to the gym, go to the beach, wear a mask when you're around others as an act of compassion, right? Versus not wearing a mask as an act of defiance. Okay? Just to try that on, right? There's a couple things going on here, question-wise, so I want to get to them before. And I really wish instead of writing questions, if you guys just want to bring your voice, I want to invite you to do that. Otherwise, I'll just read it. Please repeat sorry, Alan. Jason, please repeat the question and comments from the folks in the room. So hopefully I've been trying to do that. If you didn't get it, the last one was about, he was talking about the rope burn, the clinging and rope burn. And I apologize for not repeating that question. And so then we got into this conversation also about, feeling defiant based on childhood conditioned experiences. I'll try to do better at that in the future. Okay, Monica, do you want to ask the question?
There we are. No, it's less of a, I guess there's a little bit of a question there. It's more of a statement, is that I came here to get my practice and my meditation, which I used to do much more regularly before COVID at my normal meditation studio. But I also have retaken on my addiction and was, God, thank God, introduced to refuge recovery, which has been awesome. And this is awesome. And I'm on the first part right now, and it's all about suffering and clinging to both good times, bad times, clinging to, so it's, I guess, moving through that. My question would be moving through that element, that, that illness that we help create by adding, an addiction of, say, drinking. How to not smoothly move through it, but how to move through it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so grateful that you're here and that you're checking out the, Refuge Recovery Program, which is a, game changer. And that's absolutely what the first and second noble truth are so much about, and why we're addicted to pleasure seeking. And then some of the other things I talked about, I see there's something about the, attachment and trauma. Yeah, I'll see if I can figure out how to attach the article. But you also can just look up attachment styles and trauma and attachment. You can just Google attachment styles, trauma, and addiction, and you'll find a ton.
Yeah, and there was the guy at UCLA.
Dan Siegel, yeah,
Well,
he has.
If you just give me his name, because I've looked up the mindful people there, so that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I will. Okay, and then but anyway, thanks for coming and being involved, and come to as many of the groups as you can. Okay, I saw a hand. Cesar or Caesar? Apologize for messing it up. Caesar, you there? Maybe not. He's there. Nothing? Okay. I mean, if you can get it unmuted, we're good. You look like you're unmuted, actually, so. All right. There is another one from Rory. Rory, do you want to put out your question?
You mean, do I want to go live with you?
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I think you were talking about the car accident and being in the car accident and being present with the trauma of being in that experience, right? So a couple of weeks ago, I was talking with Noah about 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows, right? And this kind of mixed experience, that yin yang, right? So to experience the trauma, right? I feel like I have gone through a lot of sorrow. And to open into that, so that when I'm beginning to open up maybe to subtle joy in a way that I hadn't before from that conversation. I was like, okay, maybe joy is not this explosive, like, which I want, but more subtle. And so as I opened to that, and you were mentioning this thing about trauma, which I think are some of my sorrows, how can I experience that? Maybe in meditation? Is it something that I can bring out so that when I'm having or experiencing trauma, it's like not always trying to like cover myself, but ease into that a little bit better than I have been. I don't need to be traumatized to keep working with it, do I? Right? I mean, that's going to happen anyway.
It is going to happen anyway, because there is pain in this world, right? That's the kind of first part of the first noble truth. There is pain in this world, and turning towards seeing and processing that pain allows us, I feel, to settle into seeing the balance, that it's not just all suffering, right? And in a traumatized, uninstructed, traumatized mind, it's just all suffering. And what I hear you saying is a beautiful thing, which is that there's this protective part that we all develop. Anyone that's experienced any kind of trauma experience a protective part. I mean, hopefully, and otherwise it's just nerve ends and life is way too much. And people think about ending their life or using tons of drugs or, all these kinds of things. So what I hear you saying, and I agree, I think that concentration practice, loving kindness, compassion for the child, compassion for those former disavowed parts, and therapy, super useful. I actually think that EMDR therapy is one of the best ways, without getting into the story and, like you said, continually re-traumatizing ourselves, which not all trauma does that. Not all trauma therapies other than EMDR do that, but there is a way in which it can be very re-traumatizing. Yeah. And so we need to be sensitive to that. And meditation can be re-traumatizing. Going to a 10-day meditation Vipassana retreat, like a Goenka retreat or something where nobody has any psychological experience, and then just jumping in, you're going to get re-stimulated. It's going to happen because we're learning to quiet and calm. Now we can develop, this is where my approach, Noah's approach, a lot of this kind of Western Buddhist psychology approach is balance, right? 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows, opening to the 10,000 joys, letting them in, not feeling overwhelmed by them, opening to the sorrows without just kind of keeping them locked into place. Also super useful. We're out of time. Sorry, there's a few hands up, and we're out of time for those. So I would say come back or come Wednesday. And if you have a question, you can ask me on Wednesday as well. So thank you for attending. Thank you for being here in attendance, socially distanced.
Are you live here on Wednesday too?
I'm live here on Wednesday as well. Yeah, it's been light, but you guys are all welcome to attend, and all of you as well, just signing up. So let's just take a moment and let's say obviously Noah and I and most of the teachers here talk about continuing to support the Sangha. This center is run completely on the donations of those who attend. Noah is about to start a class, which is I'm super excited about. Ajahn Amaro, looking at some of Ajahn Amaro's teachings, who is Noah's core teacher, and that's going to be like, I'm not sure how long it is, but it's several weeks, maybe even several months. 3 months, yeah. And it's going to be a book study and practice, and there can be an online, possibly a personalized component. So I just really support you all to be involved in that, and also support you all to continue to support our group. And you can do that through the website. There's againstthestream.com donation, and then through Venmo, Against the Stream Meditation, I believe it is, or Against the Stream. I think it's Against the Stream Meditation on Venmo. And just being as involved as you can, right, really helps keep the doors open for us in the here and now. So gathering up all the goodness of our practice and just taking a moment and first of all, acknowledging yourself for showing up for this practice, for showing up both in person, online. It's so easy to just do something else, watch the next episode on Netflix, whatever, right? So acknowledging yourself for taking this time and taking in the goodness of this practice, and then expanding that out in all directions. May all beings benefit from our practice. May all beings be free from suffering. May we all do what needs to be done to free ourselves and make a positive change in the world. Thank you all who attended online, all of you who attended here.